Hello and welcome to this professional development video on IEP data matrices. My name is Brent Elder, and I'm an assistant professor in the Interdisciplinary and Inclusive Education Department at Rowan University. So in this video, we'll be discussing the functions of data matrices, also known as data sheets, and I will provide a few examples of data matrices. So the functions of data matrices are quite a few. Obviously, to monitor and evaluate student progress, to understand the suitability of supports and adaptations or modifications to the curriculum, clarity about planning and implementation of IEPs, to provide all team members with understandings of student goals, to communicate a lot of information very clearly, and to increase accountability and transparency in practices. So if you have everything really laid out so everyone understands where the student is at, then you have a higher chance that everyone is on the same page and doing things in a similar fashion. So when you create data matrices, it's based on the IEP, obviously, and a positive strength-based student profile. So in previous videos, we were discussing things like person-centered planning, writing strength-based, measurable, and benchmarked IEP goals, having action plan meetings. All of those things are connected to data matrices because if you have very clear goals and everyone is on the same page, you can tweak those goals depending on how the student is doing, how they're progressing. And so you want to collect data at least weekly, hopefully daily. And they really help provide clarity with program planning. And so if you're taking data, weekly, you can, with every marking period, you know how to ratchet the skills up or go back depending on how the student is doing. You can do data matrices for planning modifications. So who's going to do which modifications and when. You can use IEP matrices for goal monitoring, and in addition to having a portfolio of student work, they can work together. And you can have data matrices that serve as communication logs. In this particular presentation, we'll be focusing on using data matrices for IEP goal monitoring in conjunction with a portfolio of student work. And I'll talk about why that's important to have both together. So here's a sample IEP matrix, and this is linked here, but you will also have access to the supplemental documents as well. So one thing I want you to notice here is that this is a sample data matrices from one of my old students named Kevin. And you notice that it's pink. That's because all of my students were fully included. And when I walked into Kevin's general ed class to co-teach or to collect the data like at the end of the week, this was on a clipboard and it was very clear. I just looked for the pink paper and that's where, and you'll notice also that this is all the IEP goals on one page. I typically try to say 1 or 2 pages front and back for IEP goals, because if you have too many goals, it's hard to manage. And if it's not easily accessible, people typically don't keep data if it's not easy to collect or easy to read. You'll notice that with a glance, Monday through Friday, you can just kind of have a very quick and easy understanding of what's been hit, what hasn't been hit. And you'll notice it's done weekly. So the very first week of school, I have matrices for all the students, and every student is a different color, just so it's easy for people to find in the class. You'll see that there's a key for goals to see if the goals are met or not. E is exceeded, 3x is met, 2x is the goal is partially met, and 1x is not met. I understand that this is subjective. And so if a paraprofessional is keeping this data, they might have a different understanding of partially met than I understand. So that's why on the previous slide, when we had the IEP matrix with the student portfolio, I'd like to have student work represent each mark on this matrices. So every week I would expect to get a portfolio of student work. And here, for example, on Tuesday with math goals, Kevin, so he was doing his math activity and he met this goal with 33-digit by 1-digit division problems. So I would expect to have a student work sample that's annotated by whoever was collecting that data that says this is the work that shows that this data point was met. And so that way I can double check and concur whether or not this goal has been met. And that goes for all of the goals. I don't expect all the goals to be met every single day, but across the week, I expect each goal to be worked on at least 1 or 2 times. And if a goal is not being met with an NA, I would expect to see that throughout the week, that it would be hit later on. And you can see later on Thursday that goal was met. You'll also notice there's a 1X here on Wednesday for Kevin's sight word goal. So he was not meeting this goal because they introduced new words, which is understandable. So it's a really clear way for people to annotate, and it doesn't take a lot of time. And again, like I said, you want this to be very simple to keep track of. Otherwise, people just don't typically do it if it's hard to do. And that way, if I'm co-teaching, I would just find this clipboard and pull it next to me. Or if an aide is working with a student in a rotation, they're just looking for this clipboard and they're constantly annotating, and it just takes a couple seconds. So here is a sample IEP matrix template. This is just one way to do them. Again, this template will be provided to you electronically. So this is just a Word doc. Some people would prefer to do using like a tablet, and you have a Google form and it's automatically collecting data digitally, which is another great way to do it. This is just one simple way where I would just cut and paste IEP goals from whatever IEP software you use. And so say it's the first benchmark for November, I just cut and paste the IEP goals for that benchmark into this data sheet, print it out, and I have one weekly every week. So there's many different ways to go about doing this. I'm just showing you one example of something that was really easy for me to manage and to keep going and increase transparency and accountability. For other examples, you can do something more digital. I just did a quick search here for IEP data matrices in Google, and this is just the page that came up with an image search. So if you're interested in collecting various types of data or using different formats, you certainly could research some of that on your own. And if you wanted to do a deeper dive on creating data matrices, this is a book that I highly recommend by Janney and Snell, Modifying Schoolwork. And I have the link here if you wanted to look at it or purchase it on Amazon. But it provides very clear examples that you would be able to make yourself as well. I provide the reference here in case you wanted to look more into this, purchasing this book. And I want to thank the LRC-South for providing this opportunity to discuss IEP matrices.